You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Good morning, everyone. Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me on another edition of Inside Automotive right here at cbtnews.com. Despite initial interest and adoption, the EV market in the U.S. still faces significant challenges, and I underline that word significant, that could hinder its growth. Today, we're joined by Lauren Fix, the founder of Car Coach Reports, to share insights into what she's seen in the EV market today. She's on the front line. She's in the trenches. She knows this stuff. We rely on her to report back to us. So, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Sure. So what are the most significant challenges that the EV market is currently facing in the U.S. from your perspective?
Well, we've seen reports and studies from companies like McKinsey and Company, and beyond that, there are other reports that about 50% on average are saying, you know what, I bought an electric car. It sounded great. Cars are beautiful. It's not the product. The product is fantastic. The problem is all of the other things that go along with that. And so 50% of people are saying, I'm not going back. And there's a lot of limitations: the cost of insurance, the cost of the vehicle, the fact that the tires need to be replaced once a year. Nobody talks about that. Do I have to charge at home? That's a small problem too. So if you have level 2 at home, that's great. But if you don't, and remember, 67% of America has a garage.
Right.
The rest don't. And so they're forced to use public charging.
Yeah, no question about it. And it's really, it's more expensive to get an EV than it is to get an ICE vehicle, right? That's another concern that consumers have.
Right. The average price of an electric vehicle is $66,000. Yes, you can buy a Kona EV or a Nissan Leaf for substantially less, or you could buy a used car. But the average price of a new ICE engine, internal combustion, not a hybrid sort of, are in that mix, brings it up to about $49,000.
Right.
So that difference alone means your insurance rates are higher.
That's right. There's no question about it. And so is there a growing concern about the possible influx of EVs from China? I mean, we hear a lot about that they're going to be building they're building very inexpensive EVs that could flood the U.S. market. What's your take on that?
Well, as a World Car of the Year juror, we had the opportunity to drive the MG, which is built by SAIC. So they're using a British brand. We've seen other brands. We've driven the Suzukis and so forth. So what China has done is they want the market. And that's how they push this electric vehicle mandate. Actually, there's some very interesting things to go with that. So they decided to build plants in Mexico because of the USMCA. They're thinking, we'll build them in Mexico, just bring them right across the border, open up a bunch of dealers and let people buy them online, and we will literally lowball the prices so low that we're going to hurt all the other manufacturers who are producing this. And this is proof in the pudding by looking at Europe. That's exactly what's happening. All these Chinese brands are coming in, and it's hurting Germany and Europe and their ability to sell vehicles. What is interesting, and no one talks about this, is while we're all talking EVs, in Russia, electric vehicles don't make sense because it's so much colder. So China is 100% the supplier of all Russian cars. They made a deal with the Russian government. Their sales of internal combustion engine vehicles is up 200%.
Oh, wow.
The price is low,
wow.
and they own the market.
Wow,
which is what they're going to try to do here.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, well, you're right. Mo, the average Joe doesn't know that, right? And it's going to affect the vehicles, I should say, the U.S. auto market in a very big way if all this happens.
Absolutely. And people think, well, what's the big deal? Okay, you have to think about who's building vehicles here. Honda has a huge footprint here in the U.S. It brings us jobs. It sells cars. We've got dealers.
Yeah.
If China starts coming in, it's going to hurt the local dealers, which hurts local economies. It's going to hurt the production of vehicles here, which means jobs. And, of course, anyone that's bringing vehicles in, they're going to have no tariffs depending upon who gets into office. So elections do have consequences. It's up to you to make the choices, and tell 10 people and bring 10 people to the polls, because I'm really concerned.
Yeah.
I'm really concerned if we go all EV here.
Yeah.
The system can't hold it. And what charges all these electric vehicles? Coal and natural gas. So again, although it sounds great on the surface,
right.
It really
that's
isn't.
a whole nother show, right? I mean, just onto itself. There's no question.
Yes.
But let me ask you, if for the person that's watching this is, well, wait a minute, the consumers don't want EVs, and therefore the OEMs are kind of or dialing back that, the manufacturing EVs. Why would they all of a sudden want them if China brings them in? Is it just because of the low cost of the car?
Yeah, it'd absolutely be low cost, which means their insurance rates would be less. But you have to think about the car manufacturers were really caught in a rock and a hard place. Anytime the government gets involved in an industry, and we've seen this with healthcare, the post office, Amtrak, and so forth, and we've also seen this in past history in the 80s of what the English have done to their car industry. It's completely gone. Yes, they're building cars there, but none of the money stays there. And we've also seen that here with Stellantis, which was FCA, which was Chrysler. They've gone out of business, taken money, and now it's not even the U.S. car company anymore, even though they're building vehicles here, which is good.
Yeah.
But when you start looking at the big picture of these Chinese cars coming in, the low cost, the manufacturers were caught between a rock and a hard place, like I said.
Yeah.
Either millions of dollars in losses per vehicle or billions of dollars in fines. So even Toyota built a BZ4X. They're not selling at all like they expected, but they were smart not to make the move. And then other brands like Hyundai, really smart. They said, we're going to do all of our chassis designed to be electric, hybrid, gas. And of course, they've got diesel available in Europe. And I was just at the factory and I was pretty impressed with what they're doing. Everything they make is like Legos. They put it together in such a way so that whenever things change, the tides shift based on governments. They're going to be prepared for that.
That is fantastic. Wow, that's just genius for sure.
Yeah.
So how do you foresee the balance between EV and ICE vehicles in the markets evolving over the next decade? You kind of mentioned a few factors, but what does the next 10 years look like from your perspective?
Okay, what I see is electric vehicles are not going to be 50% of the marketplace. They will always be available, and they should be available. If you want to buy a Tesla or you want to buy, a Kia hybrid, an EV, an EV6, go buy it.
Yeah.
You should be able to buy that. And then maybe it's your second car or your first car. Everyone's got a different lifestyle. So you should be able to have those choices, which is what America's always been about. But what I see down the road is I see something coming back, and I kind of chuckle with my friends. I'm part of this automotive brain trust. And we always kind of laugh that, remember diesel in the 70s? Everyone said, it's terrible. They disappeared. Came back in 2000.
Yeah.
Everybody loved it. I have a diesel SUV, and I'm not getting rid of it. It's a 2016, the last of the last. But in Europe, they're doing diesel hybrid, 70 miles to the gallon.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, if they brought that here to the U.S., that's a winner all day long. Yeah. You get the best of everything. You get diesel. You get long-distance gene fill-up. You get the hybrid electric when you want it.
Yeah.
And it gives you that high MPGs. And I think consumers would really want that. Now, we don't have that here. Again, it depends upon who's in office and what they're willing to listen to.
Sure.
And I don't get involved in politics as far as anything in Washington. But if consumers want it, and they start talking to manufacturers, you're going to start seeing it reappearing.
That's right. That's right. And many of the dealers that I talk to, we'll talk about OEMs that have kind of forced these EVs, down the throats of car dealers over the last couple of years. Although OEMs are dialing that back. So we'll talk about it, and they'll say, well, it's really not the OEM to blame as much as it is the government that says this is our mandate. You've got to build these vehicles. And I think the average consumer doesn't realize that. They don't realize that the government is breathing down the backs of these OEMs and saying, hey, this is the way it shall be. And the consumer is going, yeah, not so fast. We don't want these at this rate, right?
Right. And I think what's going to happen is the cost of used cars is going to go up depending upon who gets elected. If Kamala Harris gets elected, there's going to be a push for a mandate for electric vehicles, especially with her vice president being announced. They're going to be heavy-handed on pushing this to the states. Now, we do know once California will push harder, that we know the 17 other states will follow, New York, Connecticut, and so forth. However, we've got the Chevron mandate, which got turned over by the Supreme Court. So there will be some legal cases. But car manufacturers are smart. They're not going to build a car for each state. They're going to build a car for the entire country.
Right.
Either this is what we have to offer or we don't have to offer.
Right.
And I think down the road, what you're going to see is less electric vehicles being sold, a good mixture of vehicles. People have different needs. But pushing this mandate to consumers and consumers pushing back is a huge statement to the U.S. economy that people are saying, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I may just keep what I have, like myself. I'm going to keep what I have. I'm going to wait till the next administration comes in and has a brain and realizes that consumers are allowed to make choices. Don't push something on us that we don't want. And sadly, the dealers take the hit. They're forced to purchase an X amount of vehicles that sit on lots. I don't care where you live across the country. I travel a lot, more than half the year, and I drive by dealer lots all the time. And sometimes I'll stop in.
Yeah.
A Volkswagen dealer, if you show any interest in an electric vehicle, they're very excited to get it off their lot, but they're not selling. I can't help, I can't make people buy things. And that's the bottom line. And sadly, what you're seeing is the brands, the manufacturers, need the cash flow of selling vehicles that do sell so they can produce new product, come up with new technologies, make vehicles better. And you're seeing people, brands offering, ability for people to retire early, cutting back on what's available.
Oh, yeah.
And that hurts consumers.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think it would take for the U.S. market to say, okay, we're open to EVs, we'll drive EVs, we'll buy EVs, and that will be our car of choice? Is it the infrastructure? Is it the cost of the car? What are those factors? What has to all line up in order for consumers to come around at the rates that the government and the OEMs would like to see?
I don't think it's possible, to be honest. I'll state that up front. The electric infrastructure is a huge problem. Our grid is completely outdated. They took over $8 billion of tax dollars, that's your money and mine, to put in electric charging stations. They've built 7 as of today.
Right.
That's a very expensive per charger fee.
But I mean, assuming that the infrastructure somehow got put in the next few years,
it'd be decades.
Decades. But do you think even that would do it?
I think the problem is the charge time. And you saw during the winter in Chicago where people had Teslas and other electric vehicles plug in, and they sat in their cars because there was no place to go. Early morning, everyone wants to get charged up and go to work.
Sure.
And the vehicles weren't taking the charge because it's so cold. And so they abandoned the vehicles. That was a huge statement. Now, I live in Buffalo, New York. We had the same problem here. We had a blizzard during Christmas the year before last, and people were abandoning their vehicles and just like, I'm done. And we've seen a big problem with that because that spreads like wildfire.
Oh,
Negative
of course.
Word spreads like wildfire,
TikTok.
Unfortunately.
Just put it on TikTok.
And so for consumers, they decided, okay, I bought an electric car. I love my fill in the blank, whatever it is. There's a lot of great choices.
Sure.
The problem they're finding is the charging. Okay, we fixed that. Okay, the insurance rates are high. Okay, we've lowered those. So that's going to be difficult because when there's even a fender bender, the insurance companies immediately say, we're going to total the car because they don't want to have a problem with a cell that bursts and potentially a fire or some other thing going wrong because you can't see it. So that's why insurance rates are high on electric vehicles is because one little door ding beyond that, they're like, yeah, we're out. And you're seeing that on all the brands. And beyond that fact is you're talking about tires. Tires wear, the vehicles weigh more, so more load, and it also does wear and tear on the roadways. And of course, you're going to start charging by the mile fees. Again, it depends on who the next administration is. We know that if the Harris administration gets in, they're going to be by the mile fees. They're going to make your gasoline powered vehicle extremely unaffordable. And I was just in the UK for a Goodwood Festival of Speed, and I got a chance to speak with some really high end people in the auto industry. Very interesting. What they do is they charge a fee for people that own gasoline powered vehicles. It's about $4,000 a year, even if it's used. And on diesels, about $2,500 a year. But if it's an electric vehicle, there's no fee unless you get it from a car manufacturer or you get it from a big brand, like you work for GE or somebody huge.
Okay.
Then you'll get the incentive. Otherwise, no incentives. And so what the problem is they have an electricity shortage. And so people that have EVs are getting rid of them, and they're having a heck of a time selling them.
Oh, I bet.
And that's going to happen here on a different scale.
Yeah, I bet, for sure. Hey, Lauren, tell our viewers, you're obviously the founder of Car Coach Reports. Tell us a little bit about Car Coach Reports.
Well, I've been doing this for about 40 years. I've worked in every aspect of the auto industry. I was a dealer trainer. I've worked in dealers. I've worked in manufacturing. I race cars, I restore cars, and I also review cars. I'm a member of the North American Car and Truck of the Year jury, past president, and World Car of the Year jury. I write for The Blaze as well as for Newsmax. I write for a lot of different outlets. You can find me on all forms of social media at Lauren Fix. I post daily. If I find something interesting that you need to know about, I put it out there because as dealers, as consumers, you want to know what's going on. A lot of times there's so much noise going on and then you miss it, which is why your show is so important to get the message out. That's right.
That's right. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for all of the content that you provided our viewers and our dealer audience out there. We've got some consumers that tune in, but for the most part, our audience is those million men and women that work in car dealerships every day, and they need information like this, and love when you're on. So you're among our top-rated shows. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. We very much appreciate it. I could talk to you all day about this kind of stuff, and obviously you've got all of the answers for us. So hopefully we can do a follow-up with you as time moves on here.
Anytime. Thanks so much. I appreciate the support.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.